Hi, I'm Jim Shaw, publisher of the Lexington Times Magazine and chairman of the board of LexMedia. We're here today with another segment of Coffee with the Candidates, and I'm pleased to welcome this morning Larry Freeman, who is a candidate for the school committee, one of three candidates vying for one position?
Two positions.
Two positions, okay, two positions. And Larry is a relatively new resident to Lexington, but I'm pleased to say he got right to work. His resume so far, for being in Lexington only a few years, is pretty impressive. I'm going to have Larry say a few words in just a minute, but I just thought I'd mention, since he's arrived here, he's been very active with the Harrington School PTO. He became chair of the Harrington Elementary School Site Council. He was a board member of the Clark Middle School PTA and the Clark Site Council. He's a member of the Lexington Public Schools Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, co-chair of the Lexington Public Schools Health Advisory Council, member of the Lexington Human Rights Committee, a town meeting member from Precinct 1, and a board member of Lex Pride. I mean, that is a mouthful. So
yes, it is.
I want to welcome you,
Thank you
for being with us today, and I want to thank you. And I would just let me start by asking you to say a few words about yourself and why it is this race is so important to you.
Thank you, Jim. This race is important to me because, as I said many times before, education is one of the greatest equalizers we have in this country. So when my family and I were crisscrossing across America and we landed here in Lexington, we chose Lexington because of its excellent school system. Mm-hmm. So shortly after moving here, I did jump in with both feet. I've always been active in the communities where we've lived. But when I saw that the town of Lexington is really by far ran by residents, I found that so intriguing. Mm-hmm. So that's what really sparked me to just jump in and become members of all these different groups, just so that I could contribute back to the Lexington community.
Great.
And my interest in schools has been probably for about the last 20 years or so. And I love schools, I love children, I love policy, and as some of my friends say, I'm just a big nerd. I like looking at numbers, and I just feel like I can make a contribution to our school committee.
That's great. And now you have children in the schools.
Yes, I have two children, one in the 6th grade and one in the 8th grade.
Great. So they're both at Clark.
At Clark Middle School.
Great. So I think it's wonderful that you come to a community and get engaged so quickly, it's so profoundly.
Yes.
But as a candidate, you're running on a lot of different issues. I see we can talk about the transparency issue, because I know that's
yes.
sort of in your policy issues that you would up on your website. And in the end, don't forget to remind people where to go and find you.
Oh, most definitely.
And then, but I want to ask each of the candidates today to talk about if there were top 3 issues, issues of concern for you as a candidate, what do you think they would be? I mean, we've got a whole variety of things going on, and not the least of which is the potential for a new high school. And
right.
So tell me a little bit about what your top priorities are.
I feel like our most acute issue is mental health and stress management for our students. Mm-hmm. I was reading an article on NPR this morning. It said that 80% of parents with children 16 and under are concerned about their mental health. And while here in Lexington, stress and mental health have always been an issue due to our academic rigors, the pandemic has just made that problem so acute. We have to address that issue now. Mm-hmm. The pandemic has students feeling isolated, the lack of structure, the uncertainty of what's going to happen next. We really need to bring in some mental health professionals and support staff that are 100% dedicated to, 1, meeting students where they are, and then 2, developing a path and providing tools so that students have the language to really express what they're feeling.
Mm-hmm. And these are students at every level?
At every level, but particularly at the high school. Mm-hmm. Our academic rigors, prior to the pandemic, we had guidance counselors, and students were always thinking, what am I going to do after I graduate?
Right.
And now with all these additional mental health issues, the strains of loss of income at home, poverty, homelessness, these are things that our students are dealing with now.
And we are dealing with those issues in Lexington.
100% we are. And we cannot just stop the mental health support of our students at the end of the school day.
Right, because remote learning, if you're remote learning, you're not near a guidance counselor, you're not near...
Right. You're isolated.
Right.
And that feeling of isolation has really had a serious impact on our students, and particularly on some of our most vulnerable students. You know, our special education students, our marginalized students. It's just a real acute issue. We really need the school committee to step up and really provide that kind of support.
And leadership on that issue.
100%.
Yeah. So what other things are you...
I'm also very interested in our special education department. We do know, I think every parent who has a special education child or a child who needs extra support in school recognize that those support services were not adequate during the pandemic, during remote learning, and especially when schools were just closed 100%. We have got to meet our special education students to try to figure out a plan to regain that loss of learning. And we also have to recognize that every time we reduce the number of school hours in a day, we reduce the number of services being provided to those students.
Right.
And a lot of those students, it's just critical.
Right.
I mean, students have lost gains that were made. And we as a school system owe those students to really help them get back to where they were.
Well, that's wonderful. Is there another?
Yes. I definitely feel like if we want to have the academic excellence continue here in Lexington, then we have to have a more inclusive curriculum.
Okay.
If 42% of our student population are people of color, and that needs to be reflected in the curriculum.
That encompasses all kinds of...
Right. All kinds.
Asian families, Indian families that are all essentially Asian families, and Black
people of
families
color
and,
from the school perspective is pretty much anyone who's not white.
Who's not white, okay.
Right, and that's about 42% of our student population.
Right.
I feel like the curriculum needs to be more inclusive. We need to celebrate the historical contributions of every race, every culture here in America. Not place blame on any particular segment, but I think we need multiple perspectives. Students should be able to look at multiple sources. That's how we teach our children to be critical thinkers.
Right.
Single source teaching, it's not going to get our students where they need to be in the future, and they're not going to be competitive in a global market if we're not teaching a more inclusive curriculum, if our teaching faculty is not more diverse. We're just doing a disservice to our students.
Are we behind in that in terms of diversity and with the ratio to teachers to students?
Oh yes, definitely.
Okay.
Like the majority of our teachers are, white teachers, but our student population is 42%.
Right.
Now, while we have, made some gains in the last couple of years, Dr. Hackett and her team, I think we need to do more.
Okay.
And it really starts with the recruiting process. It starts with how the job description is written.
Right.
And then it goes to the recruitment. If you want minority teachers, then you have to target where minority students go to get their education degrees. And I think Dr. Hackett has definitely put a lot of work into that, and to that I give her credit.
Great. I noticed one of the things that you talk about on your website is the issue of transparency.
Oh, yes.
And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, because that could mean a whole lot of different things. And the connotation sometimes is, well, there are things going on that we should know about that they don't want us to know about. I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, but the issue of transparency in general. Tell us what you're talking about when you say we need to address the issue of transparency.
When I say transparency, I'm specifically talking about things that come to the school committee for a vote. Quite often, there's very little dialogue, very little debate between members on the school committee. Most votes are unanimous, but there's no dialogue. That's not how you build trust with the community. I think that, you know, school committee members have an obligation to the people who voted them into office. And part of that obligation is having an honest conversation and asking difficult and awkward questions when things come for a vote on camera in front of the whole community, so that the community is aware of, one, yes, I am thinking about the issues, I'm thinking about your children, I'm thinking about our students, student body as a whole, and here are the questions that I'm asking Dr. Hackett about this proposal. And I think the more dialogue, the more conversations we have, the more trust the community is going to have in the school committee and in Dr. Hackett.
So what you're saying essentially is, if elected to the school committee, you will ask those questions. You will bring these issues to a more full discussion?
Oh, most definitely. If you had attended any of the 15 different groups that I'm on, if you attend any of those meetings, you know I'm going to ask the questions. I'm that guy that is going to make everybody feel awkward for a moment.
Right.
But at the end, we're going to come to a good consensus and we're going to move forward. But I think certain things have to be said out loud so that they can be talked about and resolved.
Okay. Kind of leads me to the next question, which is about the high school. You know, they're talking about that we probably reached the end of the road with this particular facility. So there's been a lot of talk about a new high school. It's going to be an extraordinarily expensive proposition. It's going to require a lot of discourse and discussion in the community, and some of that transparency that you talk about needs to be present there. So what are your thoughts on the high school and moving forward with that?
Well, we should have a final decision from MSBA whether we are going to be approved to be in the funding pipeline for this coming year, first week of March. We're talking about $400 million here, at least. At least $400 million.
Yeah.
That kind of funding is going to require extensive feedback from all stakeholders. Whether a resident has a child in our school system or not, the new high school is going to impact you. It's going to impact your life. You have every right to give some feedback. As a school committee member, I would definitely welcome that feedback. I am a project manager for a finance company. That's what I do professionally.
I was going to ask you that at the end because I think it's important for people to know, but go ahead.
Yes. So I look at $400 million numbers every day. It's not uncommon that I'm looking at spreadsheets, balance sheets, and trying to reconcile those numbers. I feel like that's going to be an essential task for a new school committee member. And of all the candidates who are running, I bring that where the others do not. We need someone who understands these numbers. We need someone who is going to be open to the community and welcome their input and their feedback. And I definitely believe I'm that best person for the job.
Right. It's important that the board work as cooperatively as possible with the superintendent. I understand that's the best case scenario. The superintendent is sort of hired to sort of lead the school system with advice and counsel of the school committee. And as elected representatives of the community, in terms of dealing with the schools, it's important for you guys to be able to work together and iron out issues that may be of concern. How do you see yourself? First of all, let me ask you, how is the superintendent doing from your perspective?
I think we have a great superintendent.
Okay.
Do I agree with every decision she makes? No. But overall, I believe Dr. Hackett has the best interests of our children. I do believe some of her decisions have harmed some students. But as far as superintendents go, I think we have one of the best in the industry.
I think so. Do you care to expand on that in terms of some of the harmful decisions she's made? I'm not trying to put you in an awkward position. I just didn't know. If you want to, feel free.
No, I don't want to really go into specifics.
Okay.
But I think we all know that school closures and remote learning didn't go as planned, that there were some unpredictable outcomes.
And some tough decisions had to be made.
Right. But I do believe decisions were made with the information that was available at the time.
Right.
Mental health, stress management, those were just things that were not foreseeable when we made those decisions as a school system.
Right.
And, I think our school board, Dr. Hackett, did what they felt was right.
So all in all, you give her high marks.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Good. Let's talk, we've got about 3 minutes left or so. I do want to talk a little bit about your background, maybe your education or what you do professionally, so that people get an idea of just who Larry Freeman is.
Okay. Well,
and about your family, too.
Okay. I am married. I have 2 children. Like I said, I'm originally from North Carolina, if you couldn't tell by my accent. I went to UNC and majored in accounting. So I've had this nerd fever for years. And after graduation, I stayed in North Carolina for maybe another year. Then I moved to Atlanta. Still worked in finance and technology fields. And I lived in Atlanta for about 15 years. That's where I met my husband. Fortunately, I've always worked remotely. Even before remote working was a thing, I was doing it. So after marriage, my husband, for his career advances, we moved all across the country. Every couple of years we were moving. He was with the same company, but he kept getting promotions, so we would move. They would move us here, move us there. And that's how we landed in Lexington. His job wasn't in Lexington, but of course, having children, you look for the best school system when you look for a place to live. And that's how we found Lexington.
And what do you do specifically? What do you're in finance. What kind of things do you do?
I am in finance. I'm a project manager, so I have a team that goes out and they pull in all the financials. I work with very large banks. We don't do like individuals, but we do very large financial institutions. We import all of their financial data, create any kind of report that the SEC requires. So if the SEC changes their requirements as far as reporting, we do annual, semi-annual, quarterly, monthly, whatever the SEC needs, we have an app that can do it.
Great.
And we tick and tie numbers because we do not want our clients to incur a fine from the SEC.
Well, maybe some of that expertise would do us well here in Lexington.
I most certainly believe it will.
Good. Just as we close, I want to thank you for coming. I want to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can learn more about Larry Freeman. You have a website.
Yes.
Why don't you let them know so they can
All right, great.
if they have questions.
You can find out more about me, Larry Freeman, at Freeman4, the number 4, Lexington.com. That's Freeman4Lexington.com. Or you can send me an email at freeman4lexington@gmail.com. I definitely would encourage you to visit my website, reach out to me. I'm more than open to meet with anyone directly, and I am available, and I am the best candidate to be on the school committee.
Great. If we didn't cover anything that you'd like to say just in our closing moments, is there anything that we didn't cover that you just want to put on the table?
Not necessarily that we didn't cover, but I do want to say I love Lexington. That's why I work so hard in Lexington to give back to the town of Lexington. We all have perspectives, but we need experience to go along with that perspective to be a qualified school committee member.
And I, not that it really matters, but I found out that where you currently live is directly across the street from where I grew up.
Nice.
I'm also a product of Harrington School, as is my son. So
great people come out of Harrington.
I think so. I want to thank you for being with us today. I want to wish you well in the election and remind people to vote On March 7th, this series will include some discussion with other members of the school committee race, and as well as we'll be talking with 2 incumbents running for the re-election to the Board of Selectmen, and also the 2 folks that are running. That are speaking on behalf of the ballot question 1, yes and no.
Yes.
And they've got some, I guess, some pretty, the pretty fervent positions. So,
Right.
Again, I'm Jim Shaw from Lexington Times Magazine and LexMedia, and I want to thank you for joining with us. And Larry, thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you, Jim. Glad to be here.